Standing before the beast they were tasked with destroying, a giant wild boar with a strange shape. Licht is the only survivor of the group. Maybe it's because it doesn't want to kill a healer yet, or maybe it's just hesitant to do it. The strange wild boar puffed its nose in triumph as it looked at the blood of the warriors spilling over the jagged stone floor of the giant cave, their bodies scattered, bruised and bloody. What the beast did was radical, without any mercy. Licht acknowledged its power, but he knew that his peace would not last if he continued to leave the situation like that. With determination in his eyes, he raised his hand. From the air appeared a small spot of light, quickly expanding into a brilliant stream of light, the rays of light weaving into curves and then turning into words full of energy. He loudly shouted the command to revive, opening the way for a counterattack. At first, nothing changed. The air in the cave is still damp and smells of death. The bodies still lay there, motionless. He had summoned the team not long before, weapons lying next to the cold bodies. Then suddenly, one of their hands twitched slightly. From the unfinished journey to the underworld, those who fell gradually returned. The knight, previously clad in shining armor, now jumped up, clutching the strangely designed sword in his hand. "I am a living weapon, don't judge," he said. Then he swung his sword and slashed the monstrous wild boar in half. Its sturdy spine could not withstand this blow. They retired to town after completing their mission. Glad to be standing under the blue sky instead of the cold dungeon. The joy was even more complete when they received a large bag of gold as a reward. One of the creatures they hunted was on the wanted list. As usual, they will divide the reward equally between 4 people. Licht receives his well-deserved reward, and the team begins to discuss how the journey seems strangely easy, as Licht repeatedly pulls them back from the dead. "Is there anything we missed?" he joked. Even though dying isn't much fun, it's not as bad as staying on the other side forever. The team constantly praised Licht, pleased to have him by their side. Even so, Licht kept his powers a secret, for fear they will abuse it. The girl patted his back affectionately, while the larger man patted his shoulder, and the leader of the group, Alan, showing great faith when saying he has complete confidence in Licht, expects him to continue his form. With a serious look, he said that he had very high expectations for Licht. Thanks to Licht's support, they were able to defeat all types of monsters without the need for resurrection spells, although he was always kept around for his usefulness. The next big mission the group undertakes, after officially becoming Adventurer Esther, is to investigate a small temple. And it is here that the story really begins. People gradually discovered it. Licht was betrayed by humanity. His gift of resurrection is truly something that can bring back even the devil. So, with the label loyal and trustworthy, team led Licht into a trap. The cold knight stabbed straight into his chest, then pushed him down the cliff in the forest, carry out a brutal assassination. The guard captain was completely ignored. The possibility that Licht's power could automatically activate. No one knew anything about Licht's return, because everyone thought he was completely dead after being pushed from the cliff. In Skyrim style, kind of fuss ro da. While thinking about revenge, Licht wondered who in the group had revealed his resurrection ability to the kingdom. But he quickly concluded that he should leave before sunset. Even though he can't die, that doesn't mean he's immune to hunger or the creatures lurking in the woods. Betrayed by the kingdom he once served, Licht decided to head towards the sea, away from those who murdered him. Within a few days, perhaps just a few hours, he had reached the shore. The exact time was unknown, but his goal was clear. What would happen if they discovered that the person they tried to erase from the face of the earth had magically returned? It was anyone's guess what force would be mobilized to solve the problem. In this world, the ratio between humans and demons is about 1 to 7. Licht had heard rumors that near the area he was looking for there was a rather suspicious dungeon, which might be where he would find appropriate help. No intelligent being would refuse his unique skill. He ventured here relying only on an unreliable source and a little intuition, embarking on a lonely journey. Without his teammates by his side, it was difficult for him to do much. Keeping himself alive was a miracle. But in the end, it was just a rumor. Licht fell to his knees shaking, collapsing to the ground as his anger rose. On the horizon, the peaceful sea slid past in sparkling starlight, as if laughing at him. In a fit of rage, Licht picked up a rock and threw it hard at a nearby rock jutting out of the water. He bowed his head in shame when he realized that the sound of impact was not the same as when touching stone. It was the sound of solid metal. Covered by an illusion, was a delicate metal door, whose beauty in black and white could not be fully captured. Don't hesitate. Licht dove into the ocean, ready for a journey across the Atlantic on his own terms, hoping this time without encountering any icebergs. Licht stood in front of the emergency exit door. Felt the strong attraction that almost wanted to pull him inside. Ancient corridors stretch deeper than light can reach. And it's magical, when he could still see without a lantern or any light source. After that, he decided to try a big move, and cast a resurrection spell right in the middle of the vast dungeon. The floor shuddered with a profound echo, as magic flowed beneath his feet like a roaring current, pouring energy into the earth, answering the call of hungry souls wanting to return to their bodies. In an instant, Licht felt like his soul was being sucked dry, his brain melting. But he quickly regained focus when he realized that there were 5 girls appearing in front of him. 5 strangely clear images. It seems like this is an interesting team, consisting of 3 young girls, a mother character, and a Victorian Gothic lady, most likely a vampire, leads us into this mysterious story. It seemed that the leader of the group of female demons was a petite girl with long hair named Mao. Miss Goth points out that Licht is the only man here, and he must have been the one who revived them. Licht, seeing the girls, couldn't hide his confusion and was especially wary of Mao, whom he looked at with shy eyes through his hair. Mao quickly ordered the remaining members to return to their assigned guard positions, asking them to keep everyone away while she wanted to have a small talk with Licht. As the servants left the room, Licht realized that Mao was the most powerful entity he had ever faced. An overwhelming source of energy filled the entire space, with the pressure emanating from her so heavy it was suffocating, as if crushing the surrounding space. Mao wanted to know how they were revived, since the group had been dead for about 100 years. And even a necromancer cannot revive someone whose body no longer exists. However, seeing that Licht had no intention of threatening, she softened, opened up and asked if he wanted to join their cause. She commented that Licht seemed to be in trouble, and this was the least she could do to help. Mao welcomed Licht into the Demon King's army, and introduced himself as the Demon King. But her real name is Arya. Mao is just a title for her, meaning Demon King. Licht introduced himself in a simple, colorless way, and Arya thanks him for his assistance in reviving the group. Licht is curious about the other members, and Arya, being Her Majesty, explains that they are her loyal servants. Arya's courtiers were grateful to be revived, but they did not hesitate to complain that the earthen bed was not very comfortable. As people especially trusted by the Demon King, each of them possesses outstanding strength, perhaps enough to take down an army if needed. Which is natural since they directly serve the Demon King. Their first mission is to restore Dystopia, the dusty dungeon in which they are standing. At least, the old layout of this place hasn't changed in the past 100 years. And this place was also known as Adventurer's Murder, in its heyday. Fortunately, this ancient structure is solidly built and will be an ideal place for them to live once again. Licht asked if he could help further, but Arya laughed and patted him on the back, telling him not to be silly. Why should I bother taking you to the battlefield? They highly appreciated Licht's special ability, a unique power of the main character that cannot be replaced. They even had the perfect person to accompany him. Even so, Licht still reminded Arya that this place was too large, with only the 4 of them managing it. Arya, appearing unconcerned, casually admitted that they didn't even have time to rest. She simply left everything to Licht without thinking much, causing him to only sigh in frustration. Although somewhat discouraged, Licht told himself that this was better than being out there, where the kingdom could find him. He advanced deeper into the dungeon, reaching the 2nd floor, right above Arya's residence, and found one of the girls hard at work, rearranging books. Her name is Ferris, the guardian of the Corridor of Sorrows. Ferris is not human. Obviously impossible when she was tasked deep in this dungeon. Licht explained that he had permission from his superiors to help lighten his workload, and he came to see how he could help. Suddenly, Ferris knelt down in front of him. In fact, Ferris was managing 5 different areas in the dungeon simultaneously, which makes her situation even more difficult. That she had to protect the area closest to Arya, where the pressure was greatest when there were intruders. Licht finds that easing her burden is not easy, as Iris and Tissa, the other guardians, work in pairs, including one who appears to be Elphys's mother, and the girl calls this person Big Sister. The only viable option so far is to install traps on Fairy's floor to make it less difficult for her to protect. Licht continued down to the primitive garden to meet the couple. Tissa, the older sister, was sipping tea, while her younger sister Iris announced a guest. They both knew Licht's name. After overhearing his conversation with Arya, and they assumed that he had come to survey the situation, Licht continued to observe the current situation and made a few suggestions, making Tissa and Iris somewhat worried. After listening for a while, Licht proposed that since the two were working together, which did the rest of the dungeon a disservice, they could share control of separate areas. Tissa, however, quickly objected to the idea, explaining that she has always been Iris's big sister, and their strengths are best developed when they are together. Decoupling is impractical. Finally, there is a Victorian goth girl named Rose, a vampire who controls the Batcave. She shouldered the heaviest workload. responsible for up to 7 different areas. Finally, like a slap in the face, Licht realized it. There was only one person who could turn their manpower problems into a joke. A name every adventurer has heard of, the legendary summoner. Decided to bring Ferris along. Licht went out looking for this person. The tomb guards were not pleased with the intruder and immediately attacked. Aim for Ferris first. Big mistake. Just a few seconds after he injured her, the tomb guard collapsed on the spot. Like a terrible massacre. When Ferris revived, she approached Licht to thank him. Ferris then returned to the tomb bearer with the small knife and struck him down. They continue their quest to find the stone tomb. The sky sparkled with starlight, the sound of crickets began to chirp in the night. The footsteps stopped in front of the tombstone they had been looking for so long. Applying the infamous resurrection spell, several rings popped out of the coffin, reaching out to them. Their owner sighed softly and asked for a little help to climb out. Ferris and Licht quickly assisted, pulled the girl out, clearing away the rocks and stones covering the revived summoner, a pretty young girl. Anyway, if they were going to revive her, they should at least dig her up first. It's not easy to breathe in a coffin. This time, they get straight to the point. They revive her to find a teammate, ideally to take advantage of her special talent, as her title suggests. The girl immediately demonstrated her abilities by correctly guessing that Ferris is not human, then asked how they could revive her without creating the bondage bond that usually comes with that kind of magic. Licht explains his special ability, including the fact that he can revive himself. After that, the group quickly left the cemetery before reinforcements arrived. Return to Dystopia. Necro immediately got to work. Summon an entire army from the underworld to guard the open areas. It only takes about 3 minutes to complete the entire summoning. Necro is also given her own area, making her another floor leader. With new support, the remaining members can relax a bit, as the spirits hold weaker areas and reinforce previously porous defenses. Necro never thought he would work under the Demon King, and she asked why a human like Licht would cooperate with demons. A question anyone could ask, especially since he wore armor that resembled a giant cross. Now he can't go back to the human world anymore, because, well, it's best not to think about that. Switching to Alan in the capital. The girl who came along asked if they had found a replacement for Licht. Normally, everyone has to fight on the front lines to protect the healer. But Licht is an exception. Healing mages are often weak. But Licht is not a support class but possesses the skill of reviving the dead. Thanks to that, he was strong enough to fight alongside them and protect himself from danger. The girl begins to show her madness, loudly proclaiming that they could always leave the healer behind to die, like last time. There were a lot of applications they had to sort through, but in the midst of that pile, Alan received a personal letter. A dungeon investigation request. Where powerful magical energy emanates from a coastal area that has been abandoned for a very, very long time. It seemed like getting there wouldn't be too difficult, since it wasn't far from where they were stationed. What really got them excited was the reward, a sum of up to 500,000 gold. Can't refuse, right? A few days later in Dystopia. Licht and Necro are cleaning up in your room. Then Necro received a warning on Discord from one of his spirits. There are signs that humans are getting closer to the dungeon. Explored the periphery and apparently discovered the newly opened entrance. However, they decided to deal with it when the time was right, because if they attacked now, they would attract unwanted attention from the enemy and could lead to a direct declaration of war. Alan and his companions entered the dungeon, and the plan to destroy them began to be implemented. Entering the first room, the adventurers encountered hundreds of souls freely wandering around the room, guarding the entrance to Arya's sacred halls. The foolishness of naive adventurers stunned by the overwhelming number of souls, and Alan exclaimed, asking if all of this was created by a single monster. Jose never said anything about a single monster. It seemed like they were facing 10 Lichts, or according to the voice from behind, is a vampire. Alan was teleported away from the group instantly, to the point where he didn't even have time to blink. Now, he faced Rose directly, who he thought was the master of the dungeon. No, she's much scarier, he thought. Even though she's not Arya, Rose is still his current opponent. It's time to die, weak people, she said coldly. Alan raised his sword, preparing to attack. But in that moment, the sword disappeared mid-strike. From behind, Rose held the sword and commented nonchalantly. The quality isn't bad. What a shame to be wasted on a species like you. She returned the sword to him by throwing it straight into her hand, with a bored expression on her face. But when Alan asked about who was controlling the souls, Licht's name was suddenly mentioned, making him stunned. The kid he saw stabbed through the chest. Yet you never thought that the ability to revive could be used on your own. Truly more stupid than a pile of rocks. Alan tried to sound brave, asking if she thought mentioning a name from the past might alarm him. Not really, little sunshine, Rose replied. Just by the way, I lost. Rose's bats bit and paralyzed Alan. Now they prepare to do what vampires do best. Rose doesn't think she'll get much blood from him. But suddenly thought, if Licht constantly revived these people, wouldn't she never lack food sources? She decided to test that theory later. Immediately, hundreds of bats surrounded Alan, all thirsting for the sweet blood of humans. The cry for help and pain of an unworthy adventurer echoed throughout dystopia. Meanwhile, in the forest, Shizuku is wandering around, trying to find out where everyone has gone. She accidentally meets Tis and Iris, preparing to enter battle. When pushed to the limit, Shizuku becomes complacent. But then one of Iris's little souls entered her body, leaving her completely paralyzed. Ended the match briefly. At the same time, Jose encountered countless souls wandering in the deep darkness, lost in the maze of the dungeon. Soon after, he came face to face with the adorable Necro. Drawing his sword, Jose prepared to fight for his life, when the legendary girl revealed nothing to him. But more surprising is when Licht walked into the room, looking for Dorothy, such a lovely name. Jose was equally surprised, as he felt Licht's strong emotions filling the dungeon. The old teammate asked surprised, "Why are you still alive?" He couldn't believe it, because he had witnessed Licht's execution with his own eyes. But if Licht was here, that meant Alan had to be there too. Licht really wants to have a conversation with Alan, perhaps using a few resurrections to teach him a lesson, some way to enhance his strength. Because Alan did not hesitate to take advantage of his precious healer. Jose also wanted to know where he was, because the group was separated in the blink of an eye. That's right, that teleport thing. Licht shrugged slightly, but then he asks an important question as the candlelight in this maze of magical traps flickers gently. Does Jose know about the execution order the kingdom has issued for him? Jose was silent for a moment, then answered directly. I know. Good, Licht replied. So what's your reaction? There was a pause, then Jose answered briefly. Our group will no longer be as strong as before. So typical of Jose, it's all about power and money. When Jose tried to ask a few more questions, Licht pointedly raised his middle finger, even revealing himself to be the one who revived the Demon King and her followers. Jose panicked, immediately asking if Licht really thought he would get away with this when the king found out. The entire army will be mobilized to destroy them, right? Go ahead. I'm ready, Licht challenged. Jose decided to retreat to the kingdom, believing that his comrades had probably died, to report to the emperor about this act of treason. I plan to use a special item to return to the surface. But at that moment, two spirits under Dorothy's orders attacked him. However, Jose turned the attack into an opportunity. Smashed the gem onto the floor. And teleportation. But instead of reaching the ground, he was pulled straight down to Farah's room again, due to an interference barrier that changed the direction of travel. Immediately, he drew his weapon, attacked Farah's, causes many injuries. Farah's fell down, blood splattered on the floor. But when she falls, her mirror curse activates. The king received notice that all communication with the adventurer team investigating the special dungeon had been cut off. If they had known, they would have assumed the worst because of the dangerous nature of the place. But the urgent question that needs an answer is, how long will it take for those monsters to become a threat to humanity's existence? Luckily, the king's powerful assistant seems to have a plan in mind. It's time to send a message to neighboring countries about the threat from this scary dungeon, before it's too late. They began urgent preparations for a diplomatic trip, with the goal of bringing peaceful warnings to those in greatest danger. Meanwhile, in dystopia, Arya is thinking. The current situation is not very good for them. Because she was fed up of eating the same food over and over again. The only thing that can save this dungeon meal is Tiss's cooking skill. But that also makes the menu limited. Limited to what Chinu can do with the few remaining ingredients. Iris tried cooking once, and the key word here is tried. But Arya suddenly thought of a solution to this problem, neatly solved in her tiny brain. Simply go out and make friends with neighboring countries. This not only ensures a new food supply, but also brings a lot of highly skilled human resources, especially when those countries are elf. First, it would make sense for Licht to recruit Tiss and Iris for this mission, since they are both part of the species. Not only elves, but Tiss and Iris are also high elves, a race considered superior to other elf breeds. Although not overly friendly, the weighty opinions of these two people can be very helpful in negotiations. If the mission is successful, they will have more meat and many other ingredients for their reserves, along with the most talented chefs. When Iris pouted and asked why she didn't cook, everyone simply assured her that the reason was just because Arya was a gourmet. Iris's food is unique and wonderful, yes, a kind of unique that can also be considered poison. Perhaps their mission was just to accompany Licht to the Elf Kingdom and protect him. Nothing too strenuous. Iris looked excited, and when they reached the surface, they were shocked. When he saw Fenrir, the giant legendary beast, being kept as a pet, Licht can rest assured that this Fenrir is well trained. Know how to distinguish who should not be attacked. However, no one is sure if it has ever tasted human flesh. Makes them lose a little confidence. As he sat on Fenrir's back, Licht, the resurrected boy, admitted that the scene was truly overwhelming. The three of them prepare for their first adventure into Lance's wilds, the elf lands. Iris is a bit sad. When they had to leave Fenrir behind, Tis was about to say more when she was interrupted by a strange sound carried by the wind, swirling around the trees. A sound that Licht could not hear, was a cry for help from afar. The enemy this time seems to be a giant spider. Something that once hunted, no one can easily escape. The two girls immediately rushed into the forest to rescue, Licht following closely behind. Unfortunately, they arrived a bit late, a little girl lying motionless on the ground, prepare to become a meal for the monster. But the high elves did not want to waste their time on this rubbish. They control small spirits. Slid into the spider's body like a hot knife cutting through butter. The giant spider was knocked down as if someone had just detonated dozens of sticky bombs. These spiders don't understand the problem. Soon, they were completely wiped out, while Licht began to revive the girl on the ground. The girl woke up, surprised to see a black monster lying face down nearby. Tise showed off her special skills, hugging the little girl to comfort her. An action that will surely make Iris jealous. The little girl bowed her head to thank the man who saved her life. Say words of appreciation. The group asked this adorable little girl to lead the way to the kingdom, and the girl happily accepted. The girl's name is Lyrica, sparkling eyes. Bright like a star. Licht introduced himself and the other two as Cow Elf. And Lyrica couldn't help but admire their beauty. The group was led through the lush green forests, straight to the kingdom they had been looking for so long, just as expected. People here live among trees and immerse themselves in nature. The streets are bustling and full of life, with shadows everywhere. However, the three of them still attracted a lot of attention, especially the two twin beauties, making the surrounding elves unable to take their eyes off, perhaps because high elves are rare, let alone having two of them appear in the same place. Lyrica runs back and announces that the princess is ready to meet them. Even though the way there was an easy and straight path, Lyrica still came along to lead the way. Looking at the majestic trees in the Elf Kingdom, Iris felt a bit jealous and wished she could plant such a tree in Dystopia. Maybe they should ask Rose if that's possible. Of course this can cause the girl to panic. Iris will have to maintain manners when standing in front of the royal princess. Even though she is a high elf, at the end of the day, Iris is still just a little girl. Between Tice and the princess, who will show more respect? It seems like Iris still doesn't understand this right away. So they stood outside to practice. Until she mastered every word and action to take when necessary. Finally, when all the preparations are done, Lyrica is ready to open its doors to the whole group. The only question now is whether they will create any good relationship with the princess behind that door. Otherwise, Arya would definitely become the only one in the area. With all the risks they are facing. With this type of task, they had no choice but to return with a worthwhile outcome. Entering the large room, they saw the princess bowing to them, in the open and spacious space. With a humble welcome to the group of three, she apologized for not being able to express her gratitude sooner, and for not thinking of a way to repay the heroes. Destroyed that scary giant spider. That monster had been a great danger to them all along, and they had no way to defeat it. But everything seems to be going well. The princess then opened the negotiations, realizing that they came with important issues to discuss with the kingdom. Iris, remembering her role, spoke up as she had been taught, expressing her desire to borrow the kingdom's most talented individuals, in exchange for jewelry and weapons from Dystopia. This was quite fair, since many people in the kingdom were also curious about the outside world and willing to accept quests. In return, the Elf Kingdom only asks for one thing: protection from monsters that often threaten their forests, like the giant spider just now, because the elf people inherently do not like violence. A simple request to warriors like them, and when the deal is completed, the princess agrees to send some of their children to Dystopia. Wait, children? Okay. And my regards to Arya. But wait, how does the princess know Arya's name when it's never been mentioned? Next is the quest to ally with the Dragon King. To do so, Licht took Rose to the desert, an interesting place for a vampire. The two chatted as they flew across the world to their destination. Rose might as well take a little break from work. Actually, the original plan was for him to go alone, but she quickly volunteered to be his escort. Rose and Licht glide through the sky, supported by a flock of bats. After a long conversation, Licht was surprised to learn that Rose was completely unaffected by sunlight, something that is not her weakness as people often think. Finally, they arrived at the Dragon King's village. In the distance, a girl standing by the river suddenly felt an evil aura. She turned her head to look towards the village, while continuing to fish something out of the water. Her companion asked what was wrong, and she explained that she had just felt a sudden influx of bad energy, although it disappeared in just a moment. For your own safety, you two should probably end the day at this sparkling blue water and return home. Especially when their mother is in critical condition. Can she get better? It's unlikely, but they can't show any signs of weakness. Meanwhile, the girl's mother has been eating less and less over the past few days. There don't look to be any signs of recovery anytime soon. Although there are healers in this world, no one has ever heard of a person with the ability to heal diseases. Meanwhile, Rose and Licht were walking around. Find someone to start building a friendly relationship with. Actually, calling this a village is more accurate than a kingdom, because the dragon people live much more scatteredly than humans. They tend to prefer separation and isolation. Rose asks what they should do next and if infiltration is part of the plan, but Licht denies it. The best option is to find a low-level dragonkin to chat with. If there are more than one, they may become hostile and immediately engage in combat, ruining any chance of friendly relations. Rose spotted 2 dragon people ahead, just returned from a fishing trip. Licht was eager to approach, so the two began to walk up, under the harsh, unforgiving sunlight. The 2 dragonkin didn't appear to be carrying any weapons, and there was no one else nearby to trade with, so Licht decided that they would start with these 2. Good evening, he said. And immediately, Kane, who seemed to be the older brother, was reminded to be wary of the approaching group. Clearly this man is human. But the woman in the back is completely different. A dark aura like plasma fire emanated from Rose, causing Kane to be wary and bluntly declare that they are not welcome. Before Licht and Rose are sent away, Licht pulls out Arya's precious sword, a personal weapon given to him as a bargaining chip. The dragon twins were surprised and deeply impressed by the sword's sophistication, to the point that they began to consider whether Licht might have brought along some medicine that could potentially cure their mother. Rose only had 1 clove of garlic in her hand. And Licht came up with a bright idea. Ask them what medicine they needed for pain relief. When Kane briefly explained his mother's condition. Hero. Licht flashed another idea. If we really have the ability to cure diseases, this is your chance to prove your abilities and gain trust. Licht quickly drew a familiar magic circle and cast resurrection spells on the long-dead fish in the basket. Seeing this magic, Laka, the dragonkin's sister, collapsed, calling Licht their savior, and she led Licht and Rose to the family's cottage. In the hut, there were 3 other dragonkin waiting, including the older woman lying on the bed, and 2 young men, looking strong but somewhat more delicate. The third person was a gray-haired man with an old face steeped in sadness. When the young people returned with 2 strangers, the whole family was a bit suspicious. However, when Licht explained he could heal, the tension gradually eased. But the question remains, how? Resurrection spells only work on dead people. Rose acted quickly. The old woman in bed breathed her last. Immediately, Licht cast a resurrection spell, and she was pulled back from the edge of death, full of life as if nothing had ever happened. She woke up as if from a quick sleep in death, leaving the whole family stunned to the core, exactly like magic. The children shouted in happiness, the old mother shed tears of joy. Finally, Licht had the opportunity to show everyone the quality weapon they wanted to reproduce. They will provide raw materials. The difficult part will be handled by the best workers. Meanwhile, far away from the vast lands of dystopia, at some edge, a giant shadow rushed towards their metal gate, creating splashing ocean waves. A colossal explosion shook dystopia's foundations. Alert all those who are not asleep of an approaching threat. Downstairs, Dorothy and Licht were conducting routine checks on the spirits and the upper floors to make sure everything was in top condition. While talking about the dual alliance that Licht had just created, he confessed that assisting the Dragon King was a stroke of luck. At least, he is self-aware of that. Despite her great efforts, Arya still seems to turn her attention to the outside world, with a mood that is both excited and seems like he wants to rule the world. Probably not. But anyway, something terrible happened 100 years ago, and perhaps she learned a lesson from that event. However, asking her about that past is almost taboo. Dorothy tried to ask, but Arya just got angry and locked herself in her room all day. Perhaps that mystery is the reason why she wishes to strengthen her military power and is determined not to repeat the same mistake. Speaking of military affairs, it seems that the human king is also hiding a certain card, and trump card that no one knows about. As Licht and Dorothy walked down the hallway, they were greeted by Rose. Announces that Arya has summoned the group to the throne room for a meeting about the East. The Demon King has begun to rampage, and the situation could get worse. Downstairs, the group finds Arya sitting on her throne, clearly upset. The room was silent. Everyone looked at each other cautiously, not knowing what to do next. Amid the tense atmosphere, fairies broke the silence, saying that they were worried about her. Finally, Queen Arya spoke. She once thought that their demon race should join forces to fight the evil that humanity causes to the world. A common enemy that everyone, even some demons, hate from the bottom of their hearts. But what about the Demon King's response? He responded by casting a spell from his castle straight to the gates of dystopia at midnight. "If you want to fight, just come here," Licht replied. After a brief exchange of information, the group clearly realized that the Demon King Garga was clearly dissatisfied with his predecessor's return, and he was determined to find a way to destroy her. To prepare for battle, Arya pairs Licht with her and makes plans, while the other members are assigned tasks. Rose wanted to rush in like a daredevil, but the more reasonable theory is that they need to avoid direct confrontation with Garga's forces because of their opponent's overwhelming strength. Instead, the team will take risks, combining Dorothy's soul and the elf girl's spirit beasts as the vanguard. Rose will use the ability to transform into bat. To get past the protection, collect information from within. Soon after, Licht and fairies left the Demon King's castle with many small spikes chasing after them, presumably for surveillance purposes. A giant creature with long horns and razor-sharp jaws slashed at them with sharp claws, knocking over an ancient tree. One of Iris's summoned beasts invades the body of a monstrous creature, with short hair like a demo character from TF2, and in just a moment, the creature roared its death scream. The demon army is truly a formidable force, stronger than anything humanity has ever been able to handle. If it weren't for the guardian beasts, the group would definitely have fallen into deep danger. Currently, the demon army has occupied 70% of the world's land area, including the eastern region where they are standing. The Demon King's castle appeared gloomily on the horizon, standing out against the background of ragged trees and sparse forests, looking like it was carved into the mountains, majestic and scary. Many adventurers have tried to explore this area, but as you can guess, none have returned. Thanks to Dorothy's distractions with her ability to control a series of souls, the group now has the opportunity to enter the demon castle and gather information, ready to report back to Arya. Then Lady Karma decided to strike a dangerous blow. Fairies was stabbed through the chest from somewhere in the distant castle. The blow hit both the heart and throat. With speculation that the attacker had also been taken out in the process, Licht looked around for other signs of danger. And when he could see nothing, he immediately revived Fairies. When she regained consciousness, Fairies began adding the word nano to each of her sentences, forgetting the ending desu as before. The two walked out into the open space, and even though the attacks had stopped, the enemy still seemed confused about what had just happened, as one of their own had been taken down. From afar, Licht pondered that the enemy might have used his power too soon, accidentally revealing a trump card. If they realized Ferris's hatred skill early, it would be a weakness that could easily be neutralized. As long as they don't kill Fairies, everything will be fine from here on out. Fairies was told to stay close to Licht as much as possible. If he could protect her intentionally, then the chance to deceive the enemy still remained. Of course, Licht didn't realize he was being a bit intimate when he said that, but he didn't understand the situation at all. Meanwhile, Licht's guess turned out to be correct. The sniper who killed Fairies died the same way, making their leaders much more unstable. They began to think that perhaps the enemy had infiltrated their ranks, because the way that girl died was very strange. In the room there were no traces of murder, no signs of intrusion or any other signs. This girl is high-ranking in the military, so it's not easy to go down without a fight. They quickly realized that the female sniper died in the same way as her target. Something was clearly wrong. The girl who found Sniper Girl immediately reported the situation to the Demon King, while Lion Commander Dover was trying to educate the intruders. After finishing, he planned to hold a meeting about the next step, and brought out the Sword of Wrath to deal with this group of people. Meanwhile, Licht thought they had succeeded in penetrating the enemy's defenses. But as soon as I thought that, Commander Dover appeared before them, accompanied by two elf children, one with a bow and one with a sword. The two elf children did not appear to be slaves, but Dover immediately swung the Sword of Wrath and slashed at Licht, while the two children began to approach Fairies. An arrow pierced her chest, and the other boy attacked, cutting her. Kill her immediately, an obvious way to show off Fairies' resurrection abilities. Although Dover has witnessed your abilities, he couldn't last much longer. When blood started to flow from my eyes, it was because Iris's summoned beasts were carrying out their duties. Finally, the Demon King noticed the presence of the intruders. Demon King of the East, Garga was bored out of his mind. He cannot rule the whole world, simply because maintaining power on that scale is too tiring and does not bring joy. To him, tormenting the weak was no fun at all, and single adventurers coming to the challenge only added to the boredom. But then a letter from Arya changed everything. She proposes a large-scale cooperation against humanity, their arch-enemy. Instead of responding to the invitation formally, Garga threw a magical attack across the country, straight to the door of dystopia, just to see how things would turn out. If she really had the potential to be an interesting playmate, Garga was ready to give it a try. In response to his move, Arya sent back an equally powerful magic attack, along with an official declaration that he was an immediate enemy. Such an ideal person for Garga, a perfect opponent like Arya. Only appeared once in a century, and she knew exactly where he lived. But when the girl reporting to him asked him what if the demon king he had just angered turned out to be the one who had been sealed 100 years ago? Does he have any chance of winning? Garga immediately denied it, saying it was unreasonable, because that entity had been banished deep underground. Speaking of fighting, Garga advised the girl to hide if she didn't want to die. She refused, deciding to stay and fight alongside him. But the question is, what can she really do? The girl just stood there, silent and confused, struggling between obeying him and running away, or staying and resisting his orders. Her decision to stay costs her when Rose's bats come crashing down, attacked her so fast that the Demon King didn't have time to blink. The girl approached Garga, her eyes dull but her face sad, and he suddenly realized she was the servant, my kindness from before. To free her from pain, he granted her a gentle death. Rose immediately spoke up, blaming her for being cruel. However, it is difficult to say that Rose has the right to condemn, when she herself caused the initial chaos. Garga wanted to ignore Rose's presence to fight Arya, but also had time to kill a little with the opponent in front of him. He smiled when he thought that Rose knew nothing about her master's true nature. "How dare you?" she shouted. But that statement only made everything clearer in his mind. He read her like an open book, forcing Rose to constantly step back and attack. However, every attack she made missed. When he was close enough, Garga gently slid his foot over Rose's heel, causing her to stumble and fall to the cold floor. He calmly said that she should use all her strength immediately, because he needed a worthy fight. He did not like torturing the weak, and her frail human form showed little to no real strength. If you don't give it your all, she would die as a useless person, disappointing him for just a small and pitiful reason. Hearing that, Rose stood up, voice cold as ice. "Okay, you win." And then she transformed into a giant half-wolf, half-bat creature. And right now Garga couldn't read her mind anymore. She acted on instinct, but his superior strength was enough to push Rose to the end. He cut off one of her arms, but she was able to respond in time, cut off one of his arms before her teeth were crushed, and a hole appeared in the chest, ending the battle. Garga admitted that, despite her short time, she was a tough opponent. On the stone floor, Rose's corpse lay motionless, surrounded by streaks of blood, proof of what she had just gone through. But then, from behind him came a familiar voice. "You seem to be enjoying yourself, right?" When Garga turned around, Arya appeared in her adorable but murderous form, ready to tear him to pieces. She seemed to appear from nowhere, but actually watched the match since he started flirting with Rose. Even the mighty Demon King of ancient times could not resist the tension between them. So Arya kept quiet and quietly observed. Now Garga must try to use his remaining arm. Although I'm a bit curious about Arya's strength. He has the ability to read her name and grasp her thoughts through a little telepathy, noting that she still holds a clear grudge over the attack on Dystopia. He thought to himself, you should relax a bit. An idea that made Arya look both surprised and annoyed. Garga was absorbed in his own unpredictable thoughts. But Arya coldly mentioned that he should quietly heal his arm with healing magic before considering another attack. Arya, knowing full well that Garga had the ability to heal, was not surprised at all. "There's no way someone like you would lack healing magic," she thought to herself. Even though she was filled with murderous intent, she was not cruel enough to hit a weak person who was recovering. As soon as she regained her strength, Garga raised her blade, put all his weight down to split Arya in half. But with a flash in his eyes and a terrifying calmness, Arya uses her ability to manipulate space, slowing everything down to the point that even if she gently steps aside, she can dodge the attack. Garga was just as shocked as when someone first heard about Raid Shadow Legends. Garga quickly realized something was very wrong. A sticky, honey-like feeling coated his limbs, making movement slow and heavy. Arya completely owns this room, with her ability to manipulate space. To emphasize her dominance, she easily broke his fingers without thinking much. The intention was not yet clear, but the attack had already been carried out. Garga had no time to counterattack, nor could he dodge, simply because he could not predict Arya's attack. Trying to make a counterattack, he threw darts towards her eyes, but Arya simply tilted her head and let them pass over her shoulder unharmed. With extremely precise reflexes, Arya demonstrates that she is in complete control of space, making everything in the room seem to move in slow motion, only she maintained her natural speed. To have an equal fighting chance, Garga needs to escape this dimension and take the fight to the outside, where Arya will be forced to face him head-on. But it was almost impossible. If he turned his back, she would take him down immediately. The only way was to kill her right here, but in this state, that was beyond anyone's ability. Knowing that Licht and fairies are coming, Arya decides to end this game before they show up. She doesn't want to let their minds be read by Garga. When Licht and fairies entered, they find Arya next to a fallen Rose. With a slight nod from Arya, Licht begins to revive Rose. And when she regained consciousness, Rose asked in confusion, "Where is the Demon King of the East?" Arya, looking kind and gentle like a mother, happily hugged Rose, happy to see her old friend alive again after the battle. With his first victory over a real enemy, Arya announced that she would hold a celebration party that night, to commemorate victory in this short war. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom, things are becoming tense when requests for support from the elves and the Dragon King go unanswered. The only solution that everyone thinks of is to contact the Rathta kingdom to seek reinforcements from the only remaining human kingdom. After a while, Arya suddenly asked Licht if he wanted to go with her to the human world. "Sorry, what did you just say?" Arya smiled, explaining that she knew of a very interesting place in the human world, and wanted to know if he wanted to go with her to explore. If it was just that, he would have agreed immediately. Except that was the place he had to run away from. However, Arya reassures her that no, she's not planning on going there. Her destination is the kingdom of Rathta. Licht suddenly remembered this name. He had tried to approach adventurers many times since then, but all had failed. There have been many rumors about the excellent warriors in this kingdom, but detailed information is extremely rare and difficult to find. So what drew Arya's attention there? It is truly a human nation. But her tone seemed uncertain. Licht sensed that she was implying that there was something strange about that country. "Is that country full of monsters?" "Almost true, but not like that," Arya replied, with a classical style of language that surprised even Licht. "The people there are all human, but their queen is a demoness." What is worth noting is that the queen did not rule the country with brutal power but lived like a normal person, enjoying everyday life. A female demon who has adapted to life among humans. And that's what caught Arya's attention. Furthermore, this queen is not an ordinary demon king. As soon as Licht grasped the situation, Arya grabbed his arm, and the two immediately departed. She rushed into the sky, flying as if it were not difficult at all. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Rathta, Queen Byrne is handling some court affairs, and the maid Anna was ecstatic about the queen's beauty and natural charisma. Afterwards, Byrne retired to his private room to rest and recharge. "When I'm alone," she almost flopped down on the bed, relaxing and releasing the accumulated pressure. Legs and arms stretched out as if a burden had been lifted. What Byrne wants is just to live peacefully among humans, not to take responsibility for them. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed when Arya and Licht appeared right behind her, as if from nowhere. She immediately threatens to call the guards, but Arya reveals that she is also a demon. "How do you know?" Arya's glowing eyes and overwhelming aura said it all. Enough to force Byrne to transform. Become a kitsune. However, Byrne still refused to believe Arya's story that she was the great demon king. Byrne was suspicious. "Do you expect me to believe such a blatant lie?" Immediately, Arya snapped her fingers after a brief warning, and Licht exploded right next to her. Byrne was completely stunned. When he saw Licht collapse, his body fell without a single movement. But just a few seconds later, Licht's resurrection skill took effect. And he sat up, resurrected from death's door. That was more than enough to convince this cute kitsune. Coupled with Arya's cold killing intent and intense magical pressure, she proves that killing a human is as simple as snapping her fingers. Arya is truly on a completely different level, far surpassing anything that still exists today. Anna knocked on the door, curious to know what the noise was, but was gently reassured by Byrne that there was nothing to worry about. Byrne then explains that all she wants is a peaceful life among humans. But unexpectedly became their queen for some strange reason. Arya was confused about whether she was smart or dumb, and that was really something to hear from someone who was only the size of a suitcase on wheels. In the end, Byrne was promised eternal beauty and the ability to revive, a form of immortality, in exchange for her absolute loyalty. After some sweet moments with Anna, includes brushing hair, and some cute noises from monsters. A few days later, friendly relations were established. At this time, a messenger from another human nation arrived wishing to meet the Queen of Byrne. She once refused invitations from other countries to avoid being discovered as a demon and being taken advantage of. But now, it seems the time has come for her to make a move. The reason the messenger came was because other humans knew about dystopia and wanted to negotiate support from there with the high-class adventurer groups here. However, because Byrne had sided with Arya, this made the human nation a rival country that she could not ignore. When Byrne asked his announcers for their opinion, he suggested that instead of rejecting them outright, they should hear them out. Cooperating to conquer a dungeon can be a wise strategy, as the place can become a threat if ignored. Additionally, gathering all the adventurers from the opposing country to meet with Arya would also be beneficial, and might even make the great Demon King more impressed with Byrne. Therefore, Byrne decided to meet with the messenger first to understand the situation better. Anna was a bit worried about her mistress's safety in this matter, meeting a high-ranking adventurer just because of an invitation. "Don't worry, kid," Byrne reassured. "Just because she's a woman doesn't mean she's weak." Byrne's plan was to seize the opportunity, lead the enemy straight into the threshold of destruction, and deal with it in one go. When she met the messenger, she came face to face with a man with a large scar running from left to right across his face. An S-rank adventurer. He expressed his honor at meeting the kingdom's rarely seen queen, even though it was essentially a kingdom of queens. The man frankly shared that they had once tried to scan the target dungeon to determine the level of danger, but the expedition party sent in did not return. If she understood, he had a hunch that if this place was left alone, it could become a threat to the whole world with enough preparation time. This dungeon was famous in the adventurer community as a hazard that should not be touched, even with stakes 40 feet long. What worried him the most was the number of powerful personnel they had sent there, including 3 S-rank adventurers, but none had returned. This implies that perhaps that place could be the residence of a demon king, if anyone has eyes sharp enough to recognize the signs. And to add to the severity, there was also a recent disturbance at the Demon King of the East's castle. It was impressive that with just a glance, he had grasped most of the situation. We are given a bit of information about the hidden treasure that the Rasaga kingdom possesses. A sword whose sharpness increases with the amount of damage the user takes. Is that the trump card? You will die miserably if you use it as your strongest weapon. Depressed man banging his head on the table. Queen Burning, remaining polite, somewhat ignored his strange behavior out of propriety. So when will they enter this mysterious dungeon? According to him, everything has been prepared on Rasaga's side, so he is just waiting for her decision. It's so convenient. Byrne flatly lied that she needed more time to inform the Adventurers Guild before taking action. In fact, she will take advantage of that time to report to Arya-sama. He cheerfully promised to bring good news from this mission, completely unaware of what he was about to face. In the depths of dystopia, Licht stopped by to visit Dorothy and share with her some fruit that Iris and Tissa had given her as a gift. Dorothy happily enjoyed it with him, because neither of them could finish the entire bowl. They sat back, enjoying fruit and chatting. Luke and Dorothy chat about how things have gotten quiet, and there really isn't much left to do now. They can just sit back and relax when everything is running smoothly. Honestly, enjoying a bit of quiet like this is pleasant. Continuous fighting can exhaust anyone. However, if they rest for too long, the work will fall on Rose again, making it difficult for her to handle her own duties. Although Rose's endurance is higher than that of humans, she still has limits. Dorothy once offered to help ease her burden, but Rose firmly refused, insisting that she was a big girl, and could take care of herself. After a warm conversation between Dorothy and Licht, which will probably make us sleepy if we listen to it for a long time, the door suddenly opened, and Arya appeared with a look of extreme excitement. She announces that the moment has come. Humanity is about to launch an attack on dystopia. Things will get extremely hot in the blink of an eye. Licht could only think of one reasonable reason given the current situation of the Rasaga kingdom, and that reason was tantamount to suicide. Arya confirms that this is a general attack, gathering humanity's most elite forces, with the goal of wiping out everything and bringing everything alive back to the underworld. If they are truly that determined, then dystopia must be a much bigger threat than it seems. It wouldn't be too surprising if they discovered who was buried here by their legendary hero. Byrne announced the upcoming attack and revealed that Rasaga is trying to build good relationships to gain important support for this campaign. No matter how hard he tried, Licht still couldn't get rid of the dark memories of his old country, where he no longer even saw them as humans after what they had done. However, Byrne could not collect any more useful information other than confirming their movements, with no specific data on strength or numbers. Arya, after pondering, turned to Licht, hoping that he might have something they could use against his old kingdom. When he shook his head, Arya immediately turned to look at Dorothy, seems to forget that dystopia has lost contact with the human world for more than a century. Now is good. With this stressful situation, if there are any tactics you want to try, now is the perfect time to implement them. Arya left the preparations to them, and decided to rest to prepare for the upcoming battle with a fresh mind. They gathered their troops, start at Batcave, where Rose is waiting. After a few formalities and cups of coffee being handed around, they got straight to the point. The plan is quite simple. Tisse and Iris will continue to deal with enemy crowds as usual, while Rose takes orders directly from Aria, and will rush across the battlefield with the goal of destroying all that are not allies. Fairies will cooperate with Licht, which makes Dorothy a little jealous. The flowers of love began to bloom between the members. With the strategy decided, Iris rested to regain her strength, only to be awakened by her big sister Elf as they prepared to enter the battlefield. It seems like the battle has begun. Rose is single-handedly holding the entrance to Dystopia, an amazing feat as the human side poured like a flood into the battlefield. This means the team's best option is to flank and clean up the stray. Meanwhile, Iris secretly added the insanity effect to her summoned beasts, causing anyone approaching the entrance to become insane. Like wild beasts, creating a bloody tornado at the entrance. One of her summoned beasts had been defeated, indicating that a highly skilled warrior was present on the front lines. Emitting murderous aura and the heat of destruction, people started attacking each other, cutting off anyone in their path. While Rose crushed all resistance, causing humans to call her a monster, one of the berserkers staggered towards his nearest comrade. The sword was raised high, intending to pierce the opponent's shield. With a violent scream, but instead of succeeding, he immediately received a strong kick in the stomach. He must have been infected by a vampire, but his condition seemed completely different. No one had ever heard of a monsterized human becoming so aggressive after being transformed. But that's hard to deny when he's trying to bite you. He stabbed his old friend right in the chest, then beheaded, leaving a small spot of light emerging from the corpse. At that moment, Rose appeared behind the killer. He immediately attacked her, trying to hold Rose off until reinforcements arrived. At least, that was Rose's initial thought, but no support appeared. His reaction said it all. He tried to act like a true hero. Keep Rose in this battle. That didn't last long as she easily penetrated his armor. His eyes, wide and filled with fear, stared at Rose, as the life slowly left his body. The man knelt as the life slowly left his face, the color fading, not that he had much color to begin with. The last image he saw was of the sharp vampire, looking down at him with a hint of pity. As Licht predicted, several enemies had broken through into his corridor and were charging without hesitation in the dim light and taste of darkness. This is when they face each other head-on and try to get some victory. But can Licht face them in an equal battle? Licht, who was a former S-rank adventurer, could win without hesitation, as long as the opponents were just ordinary humans. But this time, the person he faced was no ordinary person. It was Guy, another S-rank adventurer. In hand-to-hand combat, Guy is a real challenge, much harder to take down than anyone else. Strangely, Licht almost expected Guy to target fairies first. Guy became legendary not only because he was among the current top S-rank, but also as the right-hand man of King Rasaga, an honorary title that has only been given to 3 people in the entire history of this nation. Compared to him, all other opponents are just like a small fish next to a shark, like a horror character in manhwa. Fairies was ordered to do her duty, and she nodded. Began to approach Guy without carrying a weapon or showing any hostility. Would he not attack the girl because of the old so-called chivalry? But not a beat slow. Fairies pulled a small knife from her leg strap and rushed in, pretended to stab Guy in the heart, to distract and steal his weapons. However, Guy was not easily fooled by such a simple trick. In the blink of an eye, he pinned her to the floor, sword drawn at the ready. Guy looked disappointed, thinking she was too weak compared to what he expected. After finishing with fairies, he moved on to his next target, Licht. Guy tried to remain polite, asking about their plan of action but only received a cold look from Licht, someone he recognized from somewhere in the past. Licht tried an old trick to escape, but was easily recognized by Guy and quickly tied up next to Ferris. Guy stabbed Licht in the shoulder, demanding to know why he was so familiar, but Licht skillfully pretended to be unconscious from the pain. When Guy realized Licht's deception, he immediately turned to Ferris. The girl has not said a word since her arrest. Guy thought that Ferris would be willing to answer the question to avoid pain, but she didn't respond at all. That's when something scary happened. He realized she had probably completely lost her mind from the stress. Guy grabbed her bangs and lifted her head, looked straight into Ferris's eyes, but the sight left a mark of horror. Her eyes contained a hatred, as if that of cursed souls, made him want to scream that he should let her go if he wanted to keep his life. A shiver ran down his spine, forcing Guy to release his hold on her before he dared to do anything more to this terrifying little girl. The door opened, and Rose rushed in. See your friend's situation. Immediately, the vampire took down the S-rank adventurer with just one kick. The discharge caused him to lose consciousness immediately. Rose was then asked to untie Licht and Ferris. As she did, She shed tears like a child, crying and apologizing for being late and for Licht being injured. When the group was untied, Fairy said she couldn't be of much help in the situation. But actually Licht is not much different. The two girls attentively examined the wound on Licht's shoulder, worried it might be infected. Rose decided to carry him on her back and the group headed to Farah's room to take care of him. Meanwhile, Rose's bats reported that all traces of humans invading here had completely disappeared. The reason is also quite simple. They woke up Arya. Arya was wandering the corridors filled with corpses, walking among those who had paid the price for her recklessness. After returning to the room without incident, Arya received a report of victory from Iris and Tisa. She decided to reward everyone with days of rest after the battle with humanity. Finally, everyone can relax and relieve the pressure from the recent battle. Rose suddenly confided to Licht that she planned to use a few days off to visit mom and dad. Something no one thought they would hear from her mouth. But are they still alive after a century? According to Rose, with a vampire's lifespan, 100 years is just a short time. So if nothing major happens, they will still be there. The surprising thing was that Rose even asked Licht to go with her. She wanted him to come along, partly for protection with the ability to revive him if anything went wrong, but more importantly, she wanted to introduce him to her parents as a lifesaver. Perhaps it was tradition. In Japan. Licht agrees, although I'm a little worried whether the two parents are scary, somewhat strange character, but Rose reassured. No, they are very gentle and always warm to those who help their family. Anyone who is a friend to their daughter is like family. And one more thing, Dorothy, the female necromancer, will also be coming along. They would depart the next morning, so it was time to rest for the long trip. While flying high, the group started chatting. Dorothy opens with Rose's past story. Turns out, Rose used to be a crybaby when she was young. While Dorothy is the complete opposite. She was made to cry every day by her teacher. But through that, she learned how to become strong. Dorothy shares that she must have a stomach of steel to handle the number of zombies that come with the legendary necromancer title. However, the story about her death was actually a lie. She was not killed by one animal but was assassinated by 5 people while she slept. Rose quickly changed the subject to her favorite animals. According to her, birds and dogs are the best children of the animal kingdom. In some ways, Rose is like a dog. Always loyal and loves to be praised by her owner Arya. And Dorothy is like a cat, which is completely understandable. Upon arriving at Rose's family home, the group realized her family was quite wealthy. Rose turns out to be a respectable lady. Lady Connor was also surprised, asking who was walking around with gorgeous clothes like her. Rose pushed open the door and walked in as if she owned the place, which was true. The servants happily welcomed and announced her presence. Rose asked to be taken to her parents, and her wish was quickly granted. Dorothy and Licht stand out clearly in this formal environment, and they were escorted into the room. Rose's father immediately showed that he was a bit eccentric, and her mother, the one who passed on her beauty. They hugged their daughter with love. Rose's father immediately ordered the chef to prepare her favorite dishes for a welcome home party. Rose introduces Licht and Dorothy as her companions. But her parents completely misunderstood. After moving everyone into the dining room, where a table full of food was already set up, Licht and Dorothy wonder if they should help. Until Rose's father, Arius, asked Licht to introduce himself. Mr. Arius and his wife Camilla started asking about Rose's personality at work. Hope she doesn't cause trouble. Licht, choosing each word carefully, talked about Rose in a much more positive light than they expected, making the atmosphere warmer. Then, her parents asked the million-dollar question. Why has Rose been absent from home for the past 100 years? Actually, it's a bit difficult to visit home after being killed. However, they didn't pay attention to that, because it was obvious that she was sitting right here, healthy and full of life. Rose's father, after reflecting for a moment, immediately concluded that whoever killed Rose would meet a painful end. And Licht, who brought their daughter back, will be rewarded handsomely. But he needed more time to think about it. In the immediate future, the whole family enjoys a delicious meal that has been carefully prepared. Arius led Licht into his private office, and shared that he was completely stunned when he learned his daughter's story, as well as how Licht revived great demon king Arya. Licht then poses an interesting question. How did Rose meet Arya in the first place? Normally, vampires and demons don't get along. Arius nodded, explaining that when Rose was a child, once a group of vampire hunters surrounded their entire family, determined to kill these bloodsuckers. At that time, both husband and wife tried to protect their daughter at all costs, but the hunters specifically target Rose. Their plan is that if they get rid of her, parents' tantrums will be more predictable and easier to deal with. After Arya appeared, she targets only the hunters, quickly destroying all but Rose's family. It all ended in the blink of an eye. Never mind that demons and vampires are mortal enemies, that didn't matter to Rose. Now the reason why she is loyal to Arya becomes clearer, especially with the warmth and affection she received from the great demon king after the battle with Garga. But Arya's had another question, already on the tip of his tongue. Why would a human like him revive the mortal enemy of his species? Licht paused for a moment before candidly admitting, I want revenge on humanity. He hadn't told Arya this yet, but that was his ultimate goal, and no one could stop him from achieving it. The older man was grateful that Licht didn't keep any secrets from him, and prepared to say something. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind asking what Dad was doing. That person is Rose, appeared in a simple nightgown. Makes her look surprisingly sweet. Then, Dorothy caught up with Licht. When he was walking around the vampire family's castle, walking a little too fast, causing her to have to quicken her steps to keep up. They discussed whether it was okay to step on such gorgeous carpets and get them dirty. But Licht points out that if they keep worrying about such small details, it will soon only become a nuisance. The two are looking for the library that Rose mentioned, part of the family castle. Suddenly, from behind, a maid's sweet voice rang out. Ask if Licht needs any service. The maid guided Licht and Dorothy through the hallways to the library they were looking for, not too far from where they stood. As you would imagine, the place is filled with shelves of classic books. One book in particular caught Licht's eye, ornately decorated with a cover made from dragon skin and a large jewel embedded in the center. While Dorothy flipped through the pages of the book, Licht opened a photo album of Rose's childhood. She was cute as a baby, and still cute now. They talked a lot about Rose's cuteness as a child. When everyone gathered around, she just needed to touch the floor. The maid, nostalgically, confessed how much she missed that little girl. Then the maid suddenly made a somewhat selfish request. She wanted to capture the moments Rose worked at Dystopia. Meanwhile, Dorothy was flipping through the book very quickly. She then tried a spell on Licht without even asking for permission, using long, noodle-like arms from the floor to tie his feet tightly. Quite rude. There were many more spells in the book, but the spell she was most interested in required a corpse, something they didn't really lack, not when resurrection was still an option. The next morning, Rose tried to wake Licht up. Because it was past noon and it seemed like if he didn't get him out of bed, he would sleep all day. But because there was no other way, she bent down and gently bit his hand. When a servant brought the news at breakfast, the whole mansion was in an uproar. There was an intruder. As soon as they heard the news, the three jumped up, all in their usual clothes except Rose. News reports that the servants have gone searching for 3 intruders believed to be vampire hunters. It seemed like this would be a one-on-one match between them and their pursuers. Licht paused for a moment to think, finally telling Dorothy and Rose that they should also join the battle. Both nodded. And 3 heroes, a vampire, a necromancer, and a magical immortal, rushed out the door. In a corner of the villa, 2 men are standing, one vigilantly keeping an eye out for any danger, while ALF, the name of one of the 2 intruders, is asked by a masked man if this is a good idea. But with a huge reward waiting if they can wipe this place out, no one wants to give up. A girl in the group sarcastically asked Mr. Mask to see if he was going to give up, thinking it was embarrassing. But in reality, the only shameful thing here is her lack of self-preservation. The real situation is far from what they are described. As they look through the research papers, on the target. According to the plan, they will surround and take down the 2 vampires living here. In true divide-and-conquer fashion, the group spread out to gain tactical advantage. However, ALF was caught by one of the servants while peeking around the corner. He quickly placed the knife in her back, warning that any more noise would cost her her life. But that warning did not stop her. The servant immediately shouted loudly calling Dorothy's name, and stabbed under the armpit, a serious wound but not necessarily fatal. Instead of screaming in pain, she collapsed immediately. Dorothy appeared at that moment, clutching Alf with the noodle hand magic she had practiced the day before. He broke free and taunted, "Finally, you've appeared, vampire?" But when he saw Dorothy's face, he was momentarily surprised. She was clearly human. He asked her to kneel, promising to spare her life if she obeyed. Dorothy, undeterred, summoned a spirit and dodged his knife blows, while he gave her a vicious kick in the stomach. However, Dorothy remained determined, counterattacked and kicked the knife out of his hand, but was strangled immediately afterwards. At this moment, the maid's corpse suddenly stabbed him in the neck with his own knife, knocking out ALF. Dorothy sat down on the cold floor to catch her breath, wondering how everyone else was doing. Unfortunately, on the other hand, Lean took down 3 vampire servants in a row, and was preparing to finish off the 4th person, who was trembling in fear. When the servant refused to give in and reveal where the master was, Lean, fed up, described what she planned to do to the poor vampire and raised her sword, showing her cold-blooded nature. At this moment, Licht appeared. Lean turned around, surprised to see a human in the vampire castle she was assigned to clean up. Licht did not hesitate to ask back. "What are you doing here? And why are all the servants behind you dead?" Lean replied frankly. "Simple, because of money. What other reason is there?" But at that moment, under the power of revival, the four maids behind her came to life on their own, and while Lean was still in the middle of speaking, they simultaneously asked if Licht was okay. He just replied softly, "I can't die." Looking around and seeing the scene of the people he had just killed coming back to life, Lean felt a strange fear. Licht told the girls to run now. Find where Rose and Dorothy are staying to be safe. They wished him luck and immediately ran away, while Lean turned around, smiled evilly, raising his sword in a ready-to-fight position. Lean, with cruel eyes, asked the question she was wondering again. Why would a human hero side with the vampires? That is no less a crime than treason. Licht raised his sword to defend himself, sweat dripping as he faced the cruel woman. Lean rushed forward, her sword flashing with clear intent. She admitted that he was not bad, even had good skills. "If you had stayed in the human world, you would have made a fortune," she said sarcastically. Licht only responded with a cold look, reminding her that, if he had stayed in the human world, he would probably have been burned alive 1,000 times like the Salem witches. Licht accepted the compliment, but Lean quickly realized he might have nowhere else to go. If so, she will give him a place to live, the underworld. Lean stabbed Licht straight in the heart and tore his internal organs. At first glance, it was a certain death, but Licht rose again, refusing to yield. Reacting, Licht slashed Lean's arm, leaving a deep wound, making it impossible for her to hold her sword steady. Realized that if he could be reincarnated forever, "You will never win." She began to desperately think about whether there was any way to end Licht's immortality. Lean calls Licht a monster, and rushed to attack again, killing him again and again. But in the end, when she realized that Licht had the impossible resurrection ability, she stabbed him again and quickly retreated. But Licht came to life again, his cold voice rang out. "So there are 2 more people, huh?" Meanwhile, we move on to the group's trump card, moving gingerly between the pillars, with a strong feeling that something is terribly wrong. He thought to himself, they should have thought more carefully before entering here. Something was wrong when no enemy appeared in front of him until now, maybe because in his mind, vampires weren't smart enough to trap humans. But now, he began to realize the truth. The size of this castle showed that they were much smarter than he thought. And to be exact, taking your opponents lightly only leads to disaster. In this case, breaking into a private castle meant he was about to come face to face with the lady of the family, who just returned from vacation. It's time to say a prayer. Because from now on, he has no chance to leave here. Rose emerged from a cluster of bats in a humanoid form, thanking the intruder for attacking one of her bats, allowing her to locate him immediately. He then commented that Rose was an interesting vampire and even asked if she was a child. Big mistake. Ignoring his provocative intentions, Rose asked if the knife he used to stab the bat was poisoned, because she felt an unpleasant sting deep in her body. He admitted that, yes, the knife was poisoned. How lucky? Rose was relieved when she realized there was nothing wrong with her body. However, she also commented that the amount of poison was very small and weak, not comparable to the type that real experts would use. He despised Rose's fighting style, but that didn't faze her. Rose continued to ask, "If I defeat you, will it be possible to prevent other hunters from gathering at the castle and threatening my parents?" He replied, "No, that just makes you considered a more serious danger." Rose laughed contemptuously. Typical human. But for her, this is not worth worrying about, because he will soon be defeated by her. He quipped that Rose's words were big, but there is no real force to support those words. However, with Rose, he did not reveal any loopholes. She still wanted to see Dorothy and Licht again soon, so she suggested that he end this quickly. Musk bragged that his teammates captured 2 of Rose's friends, and she had no way of knowing whether this was true or not. Rose couldn't recognize the forgery, so when she quickly approached him and bit his hand, doing vampire work, he immediately took advantage of the opportunity and tricked her into turning away to find her friends. However, Rose transformed and flew away just before he could stab her in the back. Before leaving, she coldly told him to stay there and die, causing him to stab himself in shock with his own sword. Afterwards, Rose quickly found Licht still safe. The 2 fly off together to find Dorothy, who is still sitting on the floor with red marks around her neck and her dress stained with blood. Licht uses his resurrection power to save the maid, and for the time being, everyone is safe. While Dorothy prepares to send her spirits after the fugitive, a terrifying presence covers the castle, bringing with it a terrifying aura of murder. Rose immediately recognized that it was her father, and this made Dorothy extremely panicked, feeling so haunted that she later had to throw up because of his murderous aura. We learn that Rose's father encountered the vampire hunter and handled things the way a vampire would. Meanwhile, Rose's parents disregarded Licht's self-deprecating words about himself, not paying attention to it. Licht and Dorothy leave the family alone for a while, so Rose can spend some last time with her parents. But Rose's father couldn't pass up the opportunity to tease, suggesting that Licht seemed like a suitable match for her. He also said that perhaps the young man also had feelings for Rose. As the clock ticked, it was time for the three to return to Dystopia. Rose promises that she will return to visit her family again someday. Rose ran out to meet her friends outside the door. They returned to Dystopia without incident, and with that, the two girls said goodbye to Licht as they all returned to their positions. He went first to his room, where little Fairies, in her nightgown, had conscientiously tidied up everything in his absence. Anyway, she should clean her room first, but that's aside for now. "How was your day off, Nana?" she asked, in her usual lovely way of speaking. Licht smiled, recounting that the holiday was fun and that he also met Rose's parents. In Dystopia, nothing important seemed to happen, which made him a little sad. Who really had a relaxing day off? Oh, by the way, Fairies said Arya recently looked for Licht. Why look for someone on their day off? Anyway, the big boss shouldn't wait too long, so they went together to find Arya in Dystopia. Thankfully, Arya's mood seemed quite relaxed this time, but before Fairies could finish her second sentence, Arya appeared behind Licht and Fairies, checking to see if he was okay. Fairies was right. Licht seemed a bit sad. A sadness from the trauma caused by humanity's betrayal. Arya saw through that and temporarily let him rest. Licht's problem is clear. His skills are accepted here, but he is abandoned by his own people. Soon, Fairies and Arya returned, informing Licht that there was a new mission for him. Byrne, the queen of the Rasaga kingdom, has requested bodyguards from Dystopia, as a talented assassin is aiming for her life. Arya reveals that the human settlement is in a state of chaos and the queen of the Rasaga kingdom is targeted for assassination. Therefore, it is likely that the whole kingdom will be in chaos when their queen is assassinated. This mission is not only to protect the queen but also to protect her kingdom. Arya couldn't leave this to anyone else, because if the worst situation happened, only Licht with his resurrection ability could ensure safety. Arya had absolute faith in Licht when he said he would try. Arya appears in a new outfit, both edgy and mysterious. Licht told her to wait a few minutes for them to leave because she was surprised at the outfit. And wonder where Arya is wearing the clothes from? They felt she was overconfident about this style. She explained that it was due to fortune-telling. Arya looked doubtful. Licht, more knowledgeable about the kitsune species, explains to his boss that some kitsune actually have the ability to predict the future, based on their spiritual powers. Arya sighed, forced to consider, and agree to create a protection plan. According to her orders, Byrne will have to be temporarily confined to this room and not allowed to go out until the situation is guaranteed to be safe. Arya didn't care if she was assassinated, because Licht was there to protect and revive her. However, it was impossible for mortals to see that scene. The problem of running the kingdom was also resolved when Anna was appointed as the queen's personal messenger, keeping in touch with the outside world. While Licht will take on the task of protecting Byrne's every moment, except for private times like going to the bathroom. With everything in order, Arya decided that it was a good time to take a nap. Byrne, from inside the room, explains the situation to Anna, who is still scared and confused. The brave girl listened, asking if her master was really okay in this situation. Byrne reassured her that everything would be fine, and she just needed to relax for a few days. And if anything happened, Anna would be notified right through the door if anything happened. If not by words, then by screams. Right now, Anna is the only person Byrne truly trusts, other than the two people sitting behind her, Arya and Licht, both of whom didn't look entirely comfortable. Arya frankly asked if trusting a seemingly talkative girl like Anna was really a good idea. Her feelings said that the child could ruin everything at any moment. However, Byrne reassured that Anna is a good person, she will do the right job when necessary. It was also surprising that Byrne could be locked in a room for 3 days without any major impact on the kingdom. It seems people put too much trust in her. Regardless, Byrne can still communicate through the door fabric, helping to limit prying eyes from every corner. Meanwhile, the nobles and politicians were also busy dealing with the crisis involving adventurers. Arya, being her lazy nature, decided to go back to bed since there was nothing really to do. Or play several decks of cards, which quickly becomes boring. Byrne and Licht weren't sure what they should do either. So the queen began to admire Licht's ability to revive. Indeed, the ability to never die may come with some drawbacks. For example, what happens when Licht dies of old age? Will the resurrection spell automatically resu back? Byrne also had some special questions. How long after death can people be revived? If we look at Arya's case, it's at least 100 years, and there's no limit to how many times it can be used. What a cheating skill. However, there is a catch. Licht cannot revive someone from afar. You need to be in the same space as them. At least according to his current understanding. He had also never tested the distance limit of this skill. Does this skill work on Dorothy's spirits? With the sky already starting to fill with stars. Byrne didn't realize how long they had been chatting, and Licht seemed to be having a good time discussing the ways of magic. But now the queen began to feel a little nervous. This is usually the time of night that she will have a warm bath outside her room. However, according to Arya's orders, no one is allowed in or out until the 3-day period has passed. Licht, gently trying to wake his boss from his horrifying dreams of merry carnage, narrowly avoids having Arya bite his hand. Fortunately, he withdrew his hand in time, avoiding a painful death and an inexplicable resurrection. Byrne wanted Arya to bathe with him and Arya agreed. Byrne thanked Licht for coming up with this idea for him. Arya asked Licht if he would join her in the bath. Licht politely declined the invitation to bathe together. The two girls headed to the secret bathroom. After 3 days of caution, a hidden door was opened, revealing a discreet bathroom. Completely out of sight of outsiders, Byrne said he had to hide this bathroom from everyone. Arya immediately entered the bathroom. Throw the clothes aside. Two girls happily enjoying relaxing time. The assassin waiting outside clicked his tongue in annoyance. There was no easy assassination for him tonight, because his target was not alone and that girl was the scariest thing he had ever seen. He doesn't know where the queen is? He only saw Licht through the slightly opened window. At this time, he shot a poisoned dart at Lichty. But after his death, Licht woke up as if nothing had happened, thinking he must have just fallen asleep. Arya and Byrne walked out of the bathroom right after, and Licht asked if anything strange happened, and Arya nodded. Arya suddenly noticed that the window was slightly open. This is not good for her space control skills. This skill only activates in closed spaces and slows time, giving her an overwhelming upper hand. Anyway, the three decided that they should rest before tomorrow, as they still needed to be vigilant. Arya pulled the soft fluffy tail of a stuffed fox as a pillow and fell asleep immediately. Licht also rested on the sofa and woke up the next morning to the morning sunlight. Byrne invited him a cup of coffee. While the Demon King woke up, Arya assured Licht that he was feeling better after yesterday's incident where he fell asleep while on duty. When she looked outside, she saw a suspicious figure hiding in the shadows of the building below, secretly observing them. Arya opened the window, startled the other guy. Arya entrusted Byrne to Licht. When they saw the other person running away, receiving a positive answer from Licht, Arya jumped out the window to chase the guy.